In recent weeks, there have seemingly been some leaks about Disney considering adopting Star Wars Knights of the Old Republic as a TV series or movie. It is true that in this current era, many fans are dissatisfied with the state of Star Wars today, saying that it is dying, that Disney has ruined Star Wars. There is always a ton of negativity surrounding this current era of Star Wars that we're in, blaming the corporate mouse for greed and destroying this beloved IP. Some propose that maybe the current Disney canon should adopt the Old Republic as a way to revitalize the brand. But I think that is actually a bad idea and it won't actually help so much. So let's get right into it today. But before we get started, if you're interested in more things related to Star Wars, the Old Republic, and artificial intelligence, do check out the rest of my channel. It seems like nowadays, whenever you browse YouTube online, the Star Wars videos that seem to get the most traction and views are critics of the franchise, rather than videos about the characters, the stories themselves, things that actually get you to love Star Wars all the more. Literal channels with entire mob following, gaining views and money just saying Star Wars bad. It is not wrong to criticize the current state of Star Wars. I'm exhausted by it as well, but I think many channels do it too much. About 10 years earlier, when Disney bought the keys to this galaxy far far away, it wasn't so bad. Sure, decades worth of stuff are now deemed non-canon, but at least Disney would have a clean slate to work with where creative freedom can flourish and, hopefully, breathe life into this franchise. There was the Rebels animated series, there was Rogue One. Force Awakens was a promising start. Things were still okay and looking bright. But there was no question that after the conclusion of the sequels in 2019, there seems to be less and less interest in Star Wars. Ironically, the more well-received mediums of Star Wars came in the form of the Mandalorian TV series and Jedi Fallen Order games. Things that one would normally relate to Star Wars, like Sith, Jedi, and lightsabers, were not really too popular to the general audience. There are indeed some cases where it is more of creative writing and execution that fails to live up to expectations of the fans, but I feel that some people may also point out that maybe Star Wars is limiting themselves too much to one era and not going bold enough to explore other things, which may be true to some degree. Most of the shows and media we have gotten are really focused on the time period around the Galactic Empire, and after a certain point it feels repetitive and exhaustive. I think that's one reason why Andor and Rogue One were good, because they were not confined to repetition of the status quo of Jedi vs Sith. And so it gives people the idea that maybe adopting a new era in Star Wars would be a good idea to make it better. First hitting the shelves in 2021, The High Republic is Disney's attempt at bringing a new era to Star Wars as a whole. Personally, I haven't read too much of the High Republic media, barring the first few arcs of the main line of High Republic comics, but I can safely say that it isn't as popular and doesn't really resonate with readers and Star Wars fans as much. It's not really the case of terrible writing, as I see a lot of reviews of the media, which are actually quite favourable. It serves as a good platform for many readers who are new and haven't necessarily watched Star Wars movies to jump into this universe full of lore and excitement, because it is an era where storytelling will not be limited by the established events of the movies. I feel like the High Republic is suffering and not gaining as much attention because of the lack of marketing and perhaps the lack of confidence in the stories that could be told in the Star Wars universe. Maybe it is still too early to tell, but even going by Google Trends alone, we can see that the High Republic hasn't hit the same popularity as the Old Republic. And we are soon to get the Acolyte TV series being set in that very era. The fact that the trailer is getting way more dislikes than likes, honestly, that just shows that introducing a new era into Star Wars TV isn't going to magically get rid of those people who just flat out hate Star Wars nowadays. Disney's High Republic era is an experiment that has unfortunately failed to bring a fresh start to Star Wars or capture the hearts of many fans. But only time will tell. Hopefully it will get more popular in the future. To a casual Star Wars fan or viewer, they mostly knew the Old Republic through the cinematics for the MMORPG by BioWare and EA, featuring characters like Satil Shan, Darth Malgus, and Jace Malcolm. Said to be one of the last bastions of the Star Wars Legends or expanded universe, that is still getting some level of updates from time to time. Although the game is mostly on life support now and the latest update was just a 3-minute conversation, even more so, the staff that formed the original Old Republic weren't even the games Knights of the Old Republic 1 and 2 from 2003 and 2004, but they were from the comics in the 1990s known as Tales of the Jedi, which only a handful of the actual fanbase would know, since the namesake is now referring to the animated shorts. I feel like the glory days of the Old Republic era are now over. They were in their early 2000s, and going into the late 2020s now, the relevance of the Old Republic is past its prime. It was a combination of 18 years worth of lore build-up and stories that made it popular at the time of the MMORPG's release. But it has struggled to remain relevant at all after its peak, especially since the stuff was deemed non-canon just a few years later when Disney laid its own groundwork for the Star Wars universe. With that in mind, while the Old Republic being adopted into mainstream Star Wars is a cool idea and is a wet dream for many, I highly doubt that it will be met with much anticipation because new audiences won't really know when and where in the galaxy this is going on. I personally was introduced to Star Wars via the Knights of the Old Republic games as a rather bored kid looking for a new game to play on the Android App Store, but that was almost 9 years ago. More people will be looking at more modern games like Jedi Fallen Order or Battlefront 2 rather than playing games that are much older like SWTOR or KOTOR. If you happen to be a comic book reader as well, perhaps you'll feel that it's a similar fate to the Ultimate Universe of Marvel Comics, originally written to be something new and special, adding more to the IP, but now somehow just dying after a decade worth of books and losing its relevance to mainstream popularity. The Old Republic era of Star Wars holds a special place in the hearts of many fans who grew up with the Star Wars EU. It was a place where stories could be told without any association to the Skywalker saga at all, and brought in many fan favourites like Revan, Kreia, Malgus, Lana Beniko, and challenged many of the status quo in the established Star Wars universe. But that in itself is an era of Star Wars that is losing its relevance nowadays, and I personally do not think that it would guarantee any revitalization of the Star Wars brand. Perhaps with good writing and a fantastic cast, they can pull this off. I would love to be surprised. But what do you think? Let me know down in the comments. And as always, thanks for watching and do subscribe for more Star Wars content. Cheers!